Hello, my name is Beth Kilmarks, and welcome to the International Council on Archives Expert Group Against Theft, Trafficking, and Tampering, or as is known as EGATT's webinar, What About Theft, Trafficking, and Tampering? This is the first in a series of 3 informative webinars planned for the spring and summer of 2025. These sessions will provide crucial knowledge on protecting documentary heritage, enhancing security measures in cultural institutions, and fostering collaboration with law enforcement agencies. Please note that these sessions will all be recorded. This session will be facilitated by Arda Scholte, the chair of the ICA's EGATT group, with panelists Eugenio, Serrano, Rodríguez, Marlene, Victoria, López, Torres, and Marina, Schneider. And so now I would like to introduce to you Arda Scholte. Arda is the chair of the Expert Group Against Theft, Trafficking, and Tampering of the Archives, or EGATT. It was established in 2018, and EGATT is part of the International Council on Archives, and it provides a forum for high-level discussion and expert advice. Arda is the former chief inspector of the Netherlands Information Heritage Inspectorate, a law enforcement organization. And besides the implementation of national laws on archives and heritage, the inspectorate is also responsible for the implementation of UNESCO's 1970 Convention. Arda has fulfilled several management functions in the field of heritage, youth, and labor market policies. She has a master's in art, education, and social sciences. And so I would like to turn now the session over to Arda.
Thank you, Beth. Beth being a member of the EGATT expert group. So, as Beth already mentioned, I'm the chairperson of the expert group, and I will inform you about our group and our activities in the past and in the near future. After the ICA conference in Mexico in 2017, a few experts came together to start a discussion about how can we raise awareness about the prevention of theft and trafficking. We shared our observations and experiences that thefts happen everywhere, not only in museums, but also in archives or libraries. When you look at the Interpol database of stolen works of art, you see there are not so many items about documentary heritage uploaded, so there's an under registration. And we also noticed that there's an increasing rate of sale via internet of documentary heritage, and often these issues don't have a clear provenance. As we worked together, we decided we have to know more about our own institutions. So the background of thefts, the awareness of thefts, and the availability of rules and procedures concerning security. So who are we? As I said, we started coming from the ICA conference in Mexico, being archivists or related to archives. However, during our experiences and exchanges, we searched for solutions and tools, and we noticed that libraries with special collections encounter comparable issues and solutions. So we extended our group and are happy to work together with the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee of IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, and with the Consortium of European Research Libraries, CERL, which has a specialized security network group. And based on our respective experiences, we share the same issues, to mention some. Huge number of items, not all registered and sometimes incomplete registered, limited security policies, and some institutions have experienced thefts but are unfamiliar with relevant legislation and lack contact with law enforcement. At the moment, this is about what we analyze together. And at the moment, EGATT has 11 members coming from Latin America, the United States, Arab and African countries, and also from Europe. What have we done up till now? First, based on our own experiences, we started a survey in 23-24 to gather more information about our fields and give us input for future activities. Today, Eugenio Serrano, member of EGATT from Spain, he will present the outcome of the survey. Secondly, we discussed how EGATT can share information about tools, experiences, and examples. We developed our website into an interactive platform. The content is ready, and it should be ready and accessible very, very soon. So keep your eyes on it. And an important issue is the improvement of the traceability of documentary heritage, given the huge amount of items we face. We thought it could be helpful to develop a tool guide with recommendations to prevent thefts, including improving the traceability. We give also, so in the guide we developed, we give the guidelines that will support organizations to monitor the items that are most vulnerable for thefts. We also give an overview of relevant international regulations. And one of them will be on today's program, the UNIDROIT Convention. And it will be introduced to you by Marina Schneider, a super expert. These international regulations are directly related to national legislations and the information needed by law enforcement agencies like police and customs. They also need to know how to recognize documentary heritage and how to handle it, also part of the guide we have developed. The guide will be presented in October 25. And the fourth item we discussed was tampering. Tampering is a rather new, for even our expert group, issue. And so we first started to develop a definition of tampering. And we formulated some questions like, what causes tampering? Could preventive instruments and legislation be the same as for theft and trafficking? Can we raise awareness, given the increasing illegal trade? And some more questions, but they will be followed up next year because we have a full program now. That brings me to what we will be doing in the coming months. As Beth already mentioned, this is the first webinar of 3. The second webinar will be on April 29th. Special one organized together with UNESCO's Memory of the World program and focus on documentary heritage in Arab countries. And the third one will be on June 26th. And that one will focus on cooperation with law enforcement agencies. As during each webinar also today, we will present examples and cases and solutions to illustrate the issue of theft and trafficking. We invite you also to send your examples to us to share with our communities. Today, we have another member of EGATT present, and she will, Marlene López Torres, and she will share some experiences from the Latin American countries on behalf of the Association of Latin American Archives. So we are very happy to have also EGATT members presenting. And the last thing coming months will be on 27th of October, a great important event. Please note it in your agendas for the afternoon of the 27th. During the ICA conference in Barcelona, we will organize a special event where we intend to bring theory into practice. The tool guide will be presented and distributed. So if you want an exemplar of this nice guide, be present. Of course, to finalize, in the coming years, we intend to continue our activities, and our program will also be presented in Barcelona. Thanks to ICA support for organizing and facilitating this webinar. And for now, I hope you are inspired to participate during the webinars and the event in Barcelona. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arda. And so now I would like to move on to our first panelist. I would like to remind people that this session is being recorded and that if you have any questions, to please put them in the question and answer box. All questions will be answered at the end of this session, not after each speaker. And so I would like to move on and introduce Dr. Rodríguez, who will provide an overview of the findings of the EGATT survey that was conducted during 23 to 24. The survey's primary objective was to assess the level of preparedness of organizations in the safeguarding of their archival collections. Dr. Rodríguez has a degree in humanities, a doctorate in history, and various master's degrees in archival studies, digitization of historical heritage, nobility law, heraldry, and genealogy. He is a member of the specialized group of archivists, librarian, and archaeologists of the Ministry of Culture in Spain. He works as head of organization and standardization at the Historical Archives of the Nobility in the Ministry of Culture. He is also professor of archives and documentary heritage at the University of Castilla-La Mancha. He joined the expert group he joined EGATT in 2023 and participates in our numerous activities related to documentary heritage. And so please welcome Dr. Rodríguez.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Well, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, first of all, I would like to thank the ICA and this expert group for making this event possible. I'm from Spain and I work for the Historical Archives of the Nobility, which belongs to the General Subdirectorate of State Archives of the Ministry of Culture. Well, as Arda Scholte said in her speech, the EGATT strives to provide a forum for high-level discussion and expert advice on the fight against theft, trafficking, and tampering of archives. With this aim in mind, in fall 2023, the expert group circulated a survey to the International Council on Archives community and to others involved in the archival and special collections field. The main goal of this survey were, firstly, setting the priorities of the archival community related to security in archives and libraries. Secondly, identifying existing resources that could be shared. And finally, determining areas where additional resources, for instance, best practices lists, are needed to assist archival institutions or special collection libraries throughout the world in dealing with missing items and potential theft. So the EGATT intends to use the results of this survey to inform our approach to developing resources, including new contents for the EGATT website, which is under development. And here we have the incomes of the survey. First of all, the survey was designed in 3 different languages, English, Spanish, and French. The total number of respondents was 192, which gives an idea about the importance of the issues included in the survey. Almost half of the participants chose English, while the percentage of those who answered in Spanish was 30%, and people who used French was 25%, as you can see in my screen, your screen. To start with, we made a preliminary question. Is your institution a member of the ICI? Well, most of those institutions that were surveyed around 60%, answered that they are not a member of the ICI. This question addresses the first topic, the fact of having a specific position responsible for security in archives and libraries. It's crucial to manage of matters. This is crucial to manage all matters related to this issue. So the existence of a designated position of a person responsible for the security and protection of archives, as I said, is essential. In this way, the majority of institutions, 65%, have a specific position devoted to these responsibilities. Registries of stolen and potentially stolen items is another subject that needs to be analyzed. They are indeed essential instruments that should be updated in order to prevent theft. This question asks about maintaining lists or registries of stolen or potentially stolen items in institutions. So very few institutions, around 29%, have only internal registries, and the amount of those having external registries is almost insignificant, around 2%. However, the overwhelming majority, 69%, don't have any kind of these instruments. Regarding experiences related to theft or loss, experience demonstrates that recognition is the first step in order to prevent similar cases. When asked about the possibility of having experienced a theft or loss of recording due to potential theft in the past 10 years, more than 40% recognized the existence of cases of theft. However, we should consider that an institution may have been the victim of a robbery, but they are not aware of it. So this percentage might be even higher. The next section is specific. It talks about specific security procedures in storage and reading rooms areas and coordination with law enforcement at all levels. Indeed, they are essential topics because they may involve the existence of previous institutional security policies. When it comes to having procedures in place to address potential lost or stolen items, a high percentage of institutions, around 67%, don't have any procedure or system to control potential cases of loss or theft. The next question is related to coordination with law enforcement, which is police, customs, inspectorate, etc., in order to prevent thefts or recover stolen items, which is above all an unresolved matter. More than 70% of those surveyed don't have any kind of contact or coordination with law enforcement. Only 24% of respondents have coordinated with local police. In addition, contacts with international law enforcement, like Interpol, are minimum. This question number 5, tries to clarify if there is an integral archival security policy at institutions. The vast majority, around 65%, recognized that their institutions don't have appropriate policies related to archival security, whereas only 34% have advanced or acceptable policies. About the existence of some kind of procedures in place to address archival security in the stacks and storage areas, a significant percentage, almost 59% of institutions have developed security systems in order to protect items in storage areas, whereas 41% of those surveyed admitted not having any procedure. In question number 7, research and reading rooms are another key topic, given that some cases of theft took place in these rooms. The existence of formal procedures in place to address archival security in research and reading rooms is relatively high, almost 60%. On this point, it is necessary to highlight that the percentage of institutions with security systems, both in storage areas and reading rooms, is quite similar. The next section is dedicated to valuable items. We cannot forget that they can be easily stolen, and they are usually sold in physical and online black markets. This is the main reason why identification is crucial to make measures to prevent theft. About the identification of items of extraordinary interest or intrinsic value in institutions, almost 73% of respondents, which is an overwhelming majority, have recognized that they keep this kind of valuable material in their institutions. However, when asked about the existence of controls in place to manage and storage items of extraordinary interest or intrinsic value records, more than a half, around 54%, have answered in a negative way, which underlines the need of taking responsibility and action about this lack of measures. The last section talks about priorities and interests. At this point, in question number 10, we asked people to choose priority areas for the EGATT to develop resources on. This way, outcomes are eloquent. First of all, best practices for archival security management, 65%, followed by best practices for research or reading room security, almost 55%. That reveals the importance of these issues and the general lack of procedures in place to prevent theft. The creation of a network for sharing information was chosen by 50%, case studies for past thefts around 35%, and to finish, tools and resources for law enforcement, 29%. So we have some conclusions to think about. Firstly, the results of the survey highlighted the culture of silence around theft and loss. That is, which is widespread in our profession. Indeed, this problem is one of the main problems in our profession as archivists and librarians. Besides, most institutions that responded to the survey stated that they don't have a general safety and security policy, and they don't maintain a registry of what has been stolen or gone missing. In addition, Of those that maintain such a register, the overwhelming majority make the listing available internally only. Despite this trend towards institutional silence around theft, tampering, and trafficking, respondents showed a fairly even split between those who have dealt with theft and those who have not dealt with theft. Given the lack of tracking around past incidents of theft, the percentage of those who deal with theft may be even higher, but respondents may not be aware of incidents that predate their tenure. Additionally, respondents generally reported limited contact or a lack of familiarity with law enforcement at any level. The survey also identified areas where the EGATT could provide support to the field, including creating best practices checklists and materials that could be used for presenting best practice information. There was also a considerable interest in the EGATT establishing a network that could be used to share information. And to finish, we have new actions and resources that will be developed in accordance with these interests and priorities. Best practices for archival security management, best practices for research or reading room security, creation of a network for sharing information, case studies for past thefts, and tools and resources for law enforcement. So taking everything into account, the EGATT thanks all those institutions and people who participated in this survey. The information provided is extremely useful to us and will be used to prioritize our efforts to create resources to prevent theft, trafficking, and tampering across the archival and special collection community. So that's all. Thank you for your attention. So, and if you have any question or comments, I'm at your disposal at the end of the session. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to our next speaker, our next panelist. She is Marlene Victoria López Torres. She holds a law degree from the American Technological University, which she obtained with honors. Deputy Director for Protection and Restitution of the Documentary Heritage of the General Archive of the Nation of Mexico. She has been working at the institution for 11 years and has represented the institution before several national and international bodies to take actions to prevent illicit trafficking of documentary heritage, as well as to protect the documentary collections preserved in the public archives and recover those that were illegally stolen. Marlene is also a member of EGATT. She will address the recovery of documentary heritage by the Mexican state and will provide examples of the most difficult cases, which resulted in the successful recovery of a stolen receipt signed by Hernan Cortez and return of the proclamation of Huejotzingo. And so please welcome Marlene López.
Thank you, Beth, and thanks to the EGATT and the ICA for the organization of this webinar. Okay, I'm gonna start. Here are two examples to show that it is possible to recover stolen documents without a photograph and without a precise description in the archival inventory. Hernan Cortez receipt case. The document is a payment order from Hernan Cortez addressed to Palacios Rubios to deliver 12 gold pesos to Master Francisco for the purchase of pink sugar for the apothecary's shop, dated between April 27 and May 3, 1527. This case began on May 25, 2022, when the General Archive of the Nation of Mexico received information about the action of a document signed by Hernando Cortés through the Action House RR Action, whose offices were identified in Boston, Massachusetts, United States of America. Then the General Archive began a process of identification of the document based on the general description and the photograph published by the Action House. And thanks to the collaboration of a historian from Spain, an expert in Cortesiano documents, and the experts of the General Archive, it was identified that the document belonged to the General Archive of the Nation of Mexico. And not only that, but we also identified the place of subtraction, that is the file from which it had been taken. It is important to note that the General Archive made this arrangement against the clock, as the action was scheduled for June 16, 2022. Why is this important to mention? Because if the action was held, not only would it be complicated to the recovery process, but also the location of the document could be lost. What did the General Archive of the Nation do to protect the document? We contacted the FBI directly and forwarded them the minimum evidence so that they could request the document be removed from the action and subsequently secured. In other words, the General Archive skipped the usual protocol to contact authorities in other countries, considering that the document was at risk. And the result was that on this occasion, unlike in a previous case, the document was withdrawn from the action before the action took place. If the General Archive have waited to follow the usual procedure, it is possible that no authority would have communicated with the Action House to inform them that the document they wanted to sell belonged to Mexico, and therefore the Action House will have been excused from the sale. However, thanks to the action taken in response to the risk, it was possible to protect the document. Therefore, national authorities must identify those situations of risk or emergency and act accordingly, as there is not always enough time to protect this type of cultural heritage. This does not mean that the General Archive did not carry out the corresponding procedure to file the complaint and request international legal assistance, but rather that the entire process was carried out afterwards to regularize the process. The cooperation of the Action House in voluntarily withdrawing the document does not go unnoticed. This means that it is important to change the vision we have of these companies and start seeing them as allies, since it is thanks to the legal commerce that goods can be located. What we must learn is to coordinate to protect the goods. How did the General Archive of the Nation prove its ownership? When the General Archive reviewed the physical file, it identified 15 missing documents. Some of these documents had a microfilm image in the archive records, but the document at action had not been microfilmed, meaning that its removal was before the microfilming date. The General Archive also had a description of the file that stated that it contained documents with the signature of Hernán Cortés, and some of the documents refer to were no longer available. On the other hand, remains of the mutilation were identified in the file. It was also identified that the stolen documents was very similar to some of the documents in the file, had the same signatures, was issued on a similar date, and had the same markings between other evidence. This evidence and others were credited through expert studies that were used by the United States Department of Justice in Massachusetts to defend the case. It is important to note that this exercise required a multidisciplinary team of historians, conservators, lawyers, and police officers to understand the modus operandi of the people who trafficked the document and to prove that it belonged to the archive. What is the type of document and why is this important? The document corresponds to a written payment order to pay a certain amount of money. And the back of the sheet shows a payment letter, which confirms that the person to whom the money order was addressed has received the money. As already said, other documents like this one, a receipt, were found in the file. And since the General Archive did not have a photograph of the document to prove that it belonged to him, nor a registration of the file that was made sheet by sheet, this similarly was one more proof that the document belonged to the Mexican file. It should be noted that historical documents are described in more detail at the file level and only rarely are the sheets described. So the identification of the type of document and the similarity of the documents of the same provenance were key to their recovery. How long did it take for the document to return to Mexico? On May 25, 2002, we received the information about the action. Subsequently, all the steps mentioned above were carried out and the document returned to Mexico on July 16, 2023. This case is a precedent that shows that it is possible to recover documentary heritage that was not photographed before to its theft and for which there is no detailed description of its characteristics, as these are not the only elements that make it possible to prove the origin of the goods. Okay, the Huejotzingo case. This is the most recent of the cases, and it is the appointment of Tecutli and Mayorazgo of Francisco Vázquez, signed by Fray Juan de Alameda, Huejotzingo, June 24, 1554. It is a manuscript in Nahuatl language, by means of which Fray Juan de Alameda exposes the procedure in which the first and only appointment of Francisco Vázquez as Tecutli in Huejotzingo was granted in a Novo-Hispanic context. In this case, the General Archive did not have a specialist translator of Nahuatl language to identify the text of the document, did not have a photograph of the document before the theft, and did not have an accurate description of the document in its inventories. So, how did the archive manage to recover the document? First, it undertook an identification process for which it received support from the International Network of Heritage Guardians, a project being developed by the General Archive of the Nation of Mexico itself to bring together specialists, stakeholders, and national authorities seeking to combat illicit trafficking of documentary heritage. Once we were able to translate the document, we began the process of searching for the Mexican archive from which it had been stolen, which turned out to be the same General Archive. It took us approximately 4 months to identify the file of the theft. To prove such subtraction, documentation related to the process that had been carried out for the Viceroy to issue the appointment was identified, as well as documentation that referred to the same document sometime after it had been issued. Another element that proved the Mexican origin was that in the same document, it was written that it should be filed in the register of the Cabildo in a public archive of the community, and sometime later it was sent to the General Archive due to the archival process for the safeguarding of Mexico's most valuable documents. These elements, among other criminalistic evidence, proved that the document had been stolen and therefore belonged to Mexico. Thereby, it was once again demonstrated that a document without a photograph before the theft and without an accurate description in the inventory can be recovered as it has unique qualities. Finally, if national authorities do not exhaust all means at their disposal to protect these goods, who will? I invite the audience of this webinar to report cases of thefts or sale of documentary heritage, since without your support, the achievement shown in this presentation wouldn't be possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marlene. I appreciate your talk. And now we are going to move on to our next panelist, who is Marina Schneider. Ms. Schneider has been involved with the UNIDROIT Secretariat in elaboration of the 1990 UNIDROIT Convention on Stolen or Illegally Exported Cultural Objects and of the UNESCO UNIDROIT Model Provisions on State Ownership of Undiscovered Cultural Objects, and is responsible for their promotion and follow-up. She is the author of the explanatory report of the 1995 Convention and articles on the Convention, and more generally on explicit trafficking in cultural property and synergies between international conventions. Ms. Schneider is also responsible for the UNIDROIT Convention Academic Project, or UCAP. Members of the board of the International Society for Research on Art and Cultural Heritage Law. She is also a member of the Scientific Committee of the Certificate in Advanced Studies on International Cultural Heritage Law at the University of Geneva. Ms. Schneider will now speak on how the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention on Stolen or Illegally Exported Cultural Objects represents a key milestone in the global effort to combat the illicit trade of cultural heritage. Her presentation will explore how the convention has effectively integrated provenance research as a central mechanism in strengthening national legal frameworks and international cooperations. Please welcome Ms. Schneider.
Thank you very much, Beth, and hello to all of you. I'm very happy to be with you today. And here is my presentation, as Beth told you, to talk to you about the 95 UNIDROIT Convention. For those of you who do not know what UNIDROIT is, let me start by just quickly saying that UNIDROIT is the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law. It's a very old intergovernmental organization because we will celebrate next year our 100 years. We are not a United Nations organization. UN is uni for uniform. And as you can see, we are in a beautiful Roman palace. And we also have a wonderful library, which was one of the biggest legal documentation center in Europe and beyond. So for us, the protection of documentary heritage is very important. We have 65 member states all over the world, which is very important for what we are doing. Indeed, the aim of the organization is to harmonize and coordinate the law. And this is what we have done in the 95 Convention. We formulated minimum uniform legal rules specifically on the return and restitution of cultural objects to fight illicit traffic. We know that,
Marina,
yes.
We have a request for you to put your PowerPoint presentation into full screen.
I'm sorry, I thought it was.
So, thank
Here
you.
it is. You're most welcome. I do apologize. We know that manuscript books are stolen. I put this slide on just because IFLA is particularly involved in one project in Qatar, and this is a region also where we know many objects, particularly manuscript, do end. So it's important also to say this. But of course, as we said before, there are thefts all over the world. I'm in Italy, so this is the theft which happened at the Biblioteca dei Girolami in Napoli. And it's very important to remind, as Marlene just said, that objects books which are stolen are also found, retrieved, and returned. And this is an example at the Library of the Antonianum in Padova here in Italy too, because they are stolen, but they are also found with the help of the law enforcement. And to fight this, there are two main international conventions which exist, and we work together. It's the 1970 UNESCO Convention and the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention. It's a very good example of compatibility and complementarity between organizations and instruments, because there is synergies between the text which exist. And the UNIDROIT Convention is building on the strength of the 1970 Convention, but of course it remedies also, and this is the reason why it was elaborated and adopted, it remedies its weaknesses on the issue of restitution. And we will see how. Marlene told us how important the legal trade is. Indeed, the instruments like the UNIDROIT Convention is not against the trade. It's against the trade in objects of illicit origin. What we want is to stop the illegal trade, but we want to encourage the exchanges and the legal trade. For sure, what the convention is aiming at is being an obstacle to traffickers. They know the law very well. The law in these matters is extremely different from one country to another, and they take advantage of those differences. This is why we need uniform solutions. The UNIDROIT Convention, as of today, is in force between 56 countries. Uruguay and Yemen are the last comers to these state parties, and a few countries are either working at ratification or accession or have almost finalized their procedure, and we expect soon more deposits. At the diplomatic conference to adopt the convention, the International Council on Archive was present. It did submit observations and was very active during the proceedings. The International Council on Archives itself was represented, but we saw in many delegations persons from the Ministries of Culture, usually, or public archives. They were very active, and we'll come back in a minute in particularly what the International Council on Archives was aiming at is to have no time limitation for action for public collections and public archives, and they did obtain it. Documentary archives and documents heritage is protected under the 1970 and the UNIDROIT Convention. You see in red particularly the categories of object covered, which are the same in the two conventions, with the difference that in the UNIDROIT Convention, they don't need to be specifically designated by states, so much larger. We are going to see how the 95 Convention is strengthening the international legal framework, how it influenced the attitude of acquirers and the professional ethics with the concept of due diligence, which was really born, if I may say so, with the UNIDROIT Convention, and how important advocacy, awareness raising, and capacity building is important in this field. The 95 Convention creates two mechanisms, one specific for stolen object and one specific for illegally exported objects. We're talking about mainly here about stolen objects, but very often an object is stolen in a country and then it leaves the country because it's more difficult to find it. So it's very often both stolen and illegally exported. It can be one or the other too. So for stolen objects, the principle is very simple under the UNIDROIT Convention. If an object is stolen, it has to be returned. It's an obligation. It will be returned, and the possessor of that object may be entitled to compensation, but at a very big, if I may say so, condition, to show, even to prove that the possessor exercised due diligence. And we'll see what due diligence is, because if the burden of proof is on the possessor and not on the claimant, we need to tell what due diligence is. For the illegal export, the convention will permit the law of a state prohibiting the export to be recognized in another country, which is not the case, and for sure was not the case when the convention was adopted. So it's very important. If you have a prohibition of export of documentary heritage, it will return because the law will be violated, which will be the cause for the return. The important thing of those mechanisms is that it is a uniform rule. In the countries which are parties to the convention, the national law will be not used, but the uniform mechanism will. This means that for stolen objects, if we compare with the 1970 convention, the object will be returned even if stolen in a private house or in a private institution, which is not the case with the UNESCO Convention. It's only a state. It will be returned also if not inventoried, which does not mean that the inventory is not important. It is fundamental, but we know how difficult it is for states or for an institution to have inventory. They have to work at it, but even without, they may claim an object back. And the burden of proof will be on the possessor. This is the big success and the big path ahead of the convention. Another way in the legal framework is that the convention does not need a national to make the convention effective. If a state ratifies the convention, it will be implemented in national law. It's very important because it's difficult for states to implement and they have to pass laws. The convention also says who can claim, and the big difference with the other convention is that a private person can claim back a stolen object. The convention also gives time limitation for actions. How long can I claim an object back? Other conventions do not speak about time limitation, which does not mean that there is no time. It means that it will depend on national law. So it's very important to have settled time limitation. And here again, this is what ICA was asking, public collections will have no time limitation for action. We try to extend, to talk to countries to ratify the convention and to have a stronger legal framework. And here I give the example of a project which started at the Qatar National Library with IFLA too, and this is where I had the pleasure to meet Arda, and it was started also under another EGATTT member, Stéphanie Père, whom I'm very happy to remind his role here. The second important point of the convention is its influence with the due diligence concept. What is due diligence? A possessor will be compensated. He will lose the object, but will be compensated if he exercised due diligence. What is due diligence? Quite simple. Ask questions. Do not buy without knowing what you're buying. So the convention gives example, for example, the obligation to access to consult a register of stolen cultural object. It was very interesting in Eugenio's presentation to see that many institutions do not have registers. It's very important. It's also important that they are accessible, any documentation, but at the same time, and it was said, but it's important to repeat, it's important that those who suffer a theft report the theft and assure that the theft is reported to the law enforcement and possibly to the Interpol database. Because otherwise, if you don't, for reputational reasons or other, you don't report the theft, it will never appear. And if I search against a database to see whether the object I want to buy has been stolen, I won't find it. So I will not be aware of it. So this is very important. Tools have been developed to help persons to exercise due diligence. I know that you'll have a webinar on law enforcement, so Interpol will explain to you its database. The Italian Carabinieri also have an important database and apps. And there's also the red list of ICOM for museums, which is an excellent tool also for law enforcement, for police, for customs. It's a list of, not of stolen objects, but of objects which are protected by law, which are very much on demand on the market, meaning at risk, for potential acquirer or law enforcement to recognize the type of objects they should be aware. The UNIDROIT Convention has had and is having a very strong impact on European Union instruments, and in particular, the directive on the return of illegally exported cultural objects. There was a first one in 1993 for the single market, which has been recasted in 2014. And the 1993 was the draft UNIDROIT Convention, half of it, and half was the 1970 Convention. When they recasted it in 2014, they took from the UNIDROIT Convention what they didn't take in 93, meaning the burden of proof on the possessor for the compensation and other things. So it's, and also in the recent import regulation, it builds also on the UNIDROIT Convention. Another impact, which is important, is on the law of states which are not parties to the convention. And I have here the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Germany. The Netherlands and Switzerland had signed the convention, but were impeded by the art market to ratify it because they were afraid of the consequences of the ratification. But they did ratify the 1970 UNESCO Convention, and in the implementing legislation, they took pieces from the UNIDROIT Convention, and in particular on due diligence. So it's also important to see the impact of an international text, even in states not parties. And to finish, I will just say a few words on how important it is to make advocacy, awareness raising, and capacity building. Because if we want to have policies, strategies implemented, we need to have the attention of those who decide. And this is why we do attend as much as we can the G20, the G7, and be in the declaration, the final declaration, recognize the importance of the international conventions and the ratification by states. And I must say that restitution of cultural object is almost in the agenda of all those meetings. And this year it's in South Africa. And restitution of cultural heritage to protect human rights is one of the priorities. To prepare policies, we also participate to the UNESCO Mondiacult in Mexico in 2022 and in Barcelona this year. It's very important because here again, last year in Mexico in 2022, there were more than 135 ministers of culture. So it's important to be there. Capacity building, of course. UNIDROIT is a legal organization, so we of course speak about law, but we do it with the art market, the judiciary, the law enforcement. We do it with heritage professionals. We do it with collectors to tell them how to buy in an ethical way. We do it with arbitrators, and we do it with countries in general, being ministries representative or heritage professionals. The UNIDROIT Convention is also a tool which helps countries to implement their obligations. The one they have, for example, under the Security Council resolutions. You are aware that since 2015, the UN Security has adopted resolutions to impede the illicit, to fight against illicit traffic, and the convention is one of the tools to do that. The UN General Assembly resolution on the return of objects, you have the sustainable goals, and you also have aspiration 5 of the African Union Agenda 2063, which is a very important document too. And to finish this presentation, I would like to say that all those texts call on relevant partners, being intergovernmental, non-governmental, professional networks, to support states to realize, to implement the declaration and agreement. And this is what we are doing with our partners like Interpol, ICOM, ICROM, UNODC, WCO, of course, and we will be there also to collaborate with great pleasure with EGATT and the groups, the expert group linked to EGATT, the one on legal affairs or shared archival heritage, to help, because we need the professional networks to enter the profession. It's not easy, we cannot reach everybody, so we all have to work together, because then we are stronger. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marina. That was a fascinating talk you gave. Absolutely. Thank you very much. And now it is time for your questions and answer session. And so please write your questions in the chat. And we do have questions coming in. So the first one is going to be for Marlene. And the question is, what's your opinion about foliation and stamping for these cases? In my institution, we do not serve anything that hasn't been previously foliated and stamped with our stamp as a measure of security. But this is a very time-consuming process. Regarding your experience, would you recommend it?
Thank you. Well, foliation and marking of belongings are good security measures, and their use is recommended. However, if it is not possible to have this measure in the short term, it is necessary to consider the measures that the institution can take in case of theft. So, of course, foliation and marking belongings are good.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, our next question is, and I think this is going to be for Arda. What is the best way to keep up to date with EGATT, what EGATT is doing with the updates on the website? And is there a mailing list to join?
Yeah, here I am. What a nice question. And of course, we as EGATT are very happy with all people wanting to help us and inform us. And the first step will have to be the accessibility of our website. So we do hope we will be able to have it working within a very short time. That's the way people can give us suggestions, can participate, and can cooperate with us. So I can give an email address, but I think it is more safe to wait for the website going on.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Arda. Now, the next question is for Ms. Schneider. Could you please explain further the reason why Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland art markets contrasted the approval of the 1995 convention? Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation.
Thank you for the question. You know, we started to work on this convention in the early 80s, well, mid 80s, I would say. It was really the first instrument to regulate the market. The market until then was not really regulated. And market countries at that time were not even party to the 1970 convention. So the market, when it saw a new instrument arriving, was scared. In particular, an instrument which says, before buying, ask questions. You know that for a long time, still today sometimes, there's a kind of confidentiality. We know what we're talking about. Oh no, this object was in a very important private collection for many years. You don't know which one. But this was the way to work. So they were quite frightened. And this made that at the end of the conference, market countries like the Netherlands, France, or Switzerland, they signed the convention. What it means, signing a convention means that you are not bound by the provisions, but you tell the community that you will not enact any piece of legislation which goes against the objective of this convention. So this is what they did. But then you have to go to Parliament to ratify the convention. And there, it started in Switzerland. The art market was extremely frightened and said, no, but you see, it's economically, it's very important. You will lose. Some collectors said, if we ratify, we will leave the country with our collections. And at the same time, Switzerland made a consultation whether they should ratify 1970, 1995, or both. The end of the consultation was to ratify both. But when they came to the Parliament, they were blocked with the 95 convention, although the Conseil Fédéral said there's nothing legally against ratifying the convention, but for the time being, we will wait, do the 1970, and then we'll see. Switzerland opened the way, the Netherlands followed, France the same. In the UK, for example, it was the contrary. They made a consultation on the two conventions, the result of which was yes, UNIDROIT, no, UNESCO, which is strange because it's not one or the other, it's the two together which are strong. So they had another committee which ended up with the contrary. So the today, the art market, if I may, just a minute, what is that EU member states, which are against the ratification of the UNIDROIT Convention, are using it because of the directive. So because they had they decided to recast the convention. So the directive. So they apply the rules of the UNIDROIT Convention without being a member between themselves, but not with other countries.
Bet your microphone is off.
Next question is for Eugenio, and the question is, what should we do to remove this culture of silence, which seems to be the cause of not reporting thefts or missing pieces?
Thank you, Beth. That is also a nice question. Well, firstly, I would say that we shouldn't remain silent because after all, silence is not the solution. Secondly, collaboration between institutions and working together with law enforcement, which is customs, national and local police, is the best solution to remove this culture of silence. We need to think about the benefits of reporting a theft um, which is the fact of recovering a stolen item. And when somebody steals a valuable item from an archive or a library, that means that we lose a part of our cultural heritage. So, though all these reasons invite us not to remain in silence.
Thank you very much. And now the next question is for Marlene. What was the most difficult part of the documentary recovery process?
The most difficult thing was to make the decision to be creative and take the first step to improve the protection and recovery process. So when my boss tell me that I must call FBI to report that the document was in Boston and was from the General Archive of the Nation of Mexico, I said, okay, I'm a little bit afraid of doing that because I need to call the Cancillería Mexicana. So, well, I will do it, and it works. We could protect, in this case, this document in Boston. So maybe sometimes we need to take to put attention on these cases that are of an urgency matter, and do the first step and improve this protection and recovery process.
Thank you. And now the next question is for Marina, and it is private and public sector roles. What roles do private institutions like museums and auction houses play in ensuring compliance with the 1995 convention? And do you think their involvement is sufficient, or should there be more regulation and oversight?
Thank you, Beth, for the question. I think well, you know, museums, for example, they have, and for many, also for the dealers, they have code of ethics. The code of, when we speak about regulation, of course, there is the national legislation, there is the international legislation, there are bilateral agreements, and there are code of ethics, which are very important. Due diligence is in most code of ethics. There is in the UNIDROIT Convention provision which says that you should exercise due diligence not only when you acquire an object, but also when you inherit an object or when you receive as a gift. We know that in some countries, it's for tax reasons, it's good to give objects to an institution. And it's sometimes difficult for small museum not to accept a gift because they have little resource to buy. So they are happy when they receive objects, but they have to be careful that it's not a way for someone to get rid of an object of illegal origin. So they need to exercise due diligence. They can, of course, do it, and they should do it without the UNIDROIT Convention. But this is why the convention is aiming at changing the behavior of the actors, whether private or public persons. I think that more new regulation, I don't think they need. They are already afraid of all the registration. And in Europe in particular, there has been quite a lot of regulation recently. But it's very for reputational reasons too. I think it's important also to make museums, private institutions which have documentary objects, for example, too, that not to be ashamed if they have thefts, because it happens everywhere in small and big. We've seen the British Museum, when we speak about museums, the British Museum, they were stolen of objects which were not inventoried. So it happens everywhere. It's just they have to go together and as Marlene said, never give up. It seems huge, it seems impossible, but now a few years ago, it was more difficult. But today, I think there's a kind of recognition that theft against cultural objects is a very heavy, a serious crime, and that something has to be done. Legally, diplomacy also is very important. It's what we call the cultural diplomacy. So this is all ways that art market actors can do to comply with the international framework.
Thank you. And now let's see, this is a general question for anyone to jump in. If you know an auction house has sold items which belong to your institution, is it possible to get them to reveal the buyers?
I think I'm gonna answer, and if everybody has another opinion, it could be. So I think it is a matter of the police, because the investigation is part of his work. So as a national archive cannot have this information and cannot manage it because of his competence, but the police in the country that is the auction house can investigate how the document or this good arise to this place and and they are selling. So is part of the work of the police.
Mike. Microphone.
Beth, your microphone.
I'm sorry. Are there any more questions from answers from the panelists on this question?
Well, I agree with Marlene. Indeed, I think from my experience in Spain, that is a competence of police, of national police, and they should manage in order to get all the information, as much information as possible about the buyers or about the facts around the stolen item.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else?
Well, I just think I saw in the chat, indeed, someone said that a public prosecutor should be involved, of course. And we do work with public prosecutors because it's a kind of a new sector and they don't always know how to approach those situations. So of course, we are here in a matter where the data protection is important beyond the fact that auction houses do not like to disclose the information that I have, but not only auction houses, because as someone says, auction houses, they are not the enemy. They are allies too, because also for them, I mean, there is a big legal trade and they are on the first row to say, we don't want someone in our work to behave badly. So it's also their duty. But of course, we know on papers you have big titles when something happens, which also helps to get things changed. But we must look at the trade as an ally and not as an enemy, and have, and of course, to share the information with those who can handle them and not to everybody.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Now, the next question is for Dr. Rodríguez. How can we improve the connection between instances and law enforcement agencies, between these instances and the law enforcement agencies in order to prevent theft?
Sorry, the question is for?
That is for you. And again, I'll repeat.
Could you repeat, please?
Certainly. How can we improve the connection between these instances and law enforcement agencies in order to prevent theft?
Mhm. Well, collaboration and awareness are crucial to improve the connection. This connection is essential. So training is equally important. At this point, the EGATT and the International Council on Archives are working to offer a wide range of information in order to support our interests. So if we can collaborate and working together, archivists, librarians, and police officers, we can reduce the negative impact of theft in archives and libraries.
Okay, thank you. And now here is a question that's going to open for the whole panel. And it is coming, it is seen from the other side. It starts off, museums can discover that something they own has been acquired illegally, for instance, by previous owners. Could you please introduce briefly the theme of provenance, such as a chain of property of a cultural or artistic item, and its importance in preventing illegal activities?
I may start if you wish.
Yeah.
Of course, it happens that you find out that what you have is from illegal origin. And the first thing is to report what you have and that you found it. But the theme of provenance, I've asked for that because for example, in the UNIDROIT Convention, provenance is one of the circumstances that you have to search into. Nowadays, research provenance has become a part of art law, if I may say, or art history too. It's a profession. It's becoming a real profession, which is not easy at all, because for a very long time, objects have circulated without any documentation, and it was not against the law. It was just the way. Legislation have been implemented in some countries very recently, in some others before. So it's not easy, but it's for sure institution must, not only at the time of acquisition, research provenance has to be made of the own collections. Being a collector, being a museum, being an archive, it's important to know what we have, and then see, this was done when the convention, the UNIDROIT Convention was adopted. Many museums started to make an assessment of their collections, and some of them took off the showcases the objects of dubious provenance. And today you see on the market an object without a provenance has a lower price. Unfortunately, you also have always more objects with false provenance. Because provenance is becoming important, we create a false provenance if the object has none. So this is another webinar, probably.
All right. Anyone else would like to jump in? Okay, the next question is for Marlene, and this is a two-part question. I'm going to combine these. Do you think the strategy that you discussed in your talk can be used anywhere in the world? And what would be the obstacles to implementing your strategies in other parts of the world?
Okay, yes. All that is needed is the will of the authorities and the alerts of the private individuals. Obstacles are lack of interest, fear of changing the process established by my institution to protect the document, the absence of complaints or alerts about illegal activities, that the authorities want to carry out the process alone in order to take this work in his favor, and not working with a multidisciplinary team. It could be some obstacles.
Okay, thank you. And any other panelists would like to comment? All right, okay, there are questions, a lot of questions are coming up. Here is one for the panel. How would you advise people to respond to institutions who might not want to disclose the register of thefts and loss?
I don't think they should disclose their registers of loss. I mean, this is for themselves. It's not to be disclosed. It's, again, a way to know what I have, what I've lost, and what I have to look for. But to disclose this, I don't think those institutions should not disclose. They should disclose it to the police, but to no one else. Well, I'm saying this, and then I know UNESCO is about to, which is also about to announce its virtual museum of stolen objects. This is another issue. I mean, it's not a register of stolen object which is disclosed. It's the decision of a state to put on a platform an object which is stolen, in the hope that someone recognized them and they will be returned. But a register of stolen object should not, for me, be disclosed to anybody else than police, and not the register.
All right, thank you. Let's see. The next question.
Beth,
Arda is asking for the floor.
Yes.
Okay, next question is, does the 1995 convention extend to works of art?
What would you call works of art? It's, as I showed, the definition of a cultural object is the one of the UNESCO Convention. That is an object which is of importance for art history, prehistory, literature, for a state. And it's a large definition. So artworks, as I understand them, yes, of course, are covered.
Beth.
My two questions. I'm sorry. I am looking. I'm sorry. Arda, would you like to answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to answer on the question, elaborate a little bit on the question of having a list of stolen items public. We know there are some institutions that have made it public. For instance, the National Archives, the NARA in the United States. They have a special page which you can visit, and they invite people that visit the site to help them look, to search, or to help them find these objects that have been stolen. So we within EGATT see it as a good example of coming over the fear of I have something stolen from me, and I am not secure, and I don't have the enough security rules. So I think you can make a list, or you can make an overview of items that are vulnerable for theft, and you should keep that inside, of course. But if something has been stolen, you can alert not only your colleagues and law enforcement agencies, but also trade organizations or platforms. So I do think that trying to be open is can be very helpful in retrieving. Thank you. And about, I just made a mistake. The third webinar, we not only invite police, but also the public prosecutor to give the story from their point of view. So attend the third webinar also. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. We are at time now, so I'd like to thank everyone, our panelists, and everyone for participating in our webinar. And please keep an eye out for our next webinar that is going to be held later this spring in April. So thank you very much. And are there any concluding remarks from any of the panelists?
Yes, don't be afraid to make alerts about subtraction and the sale of documentary heritage, and contact your National Archive, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you all.